Now let's talk about Dortmund. Nuri Şahin, he's just been appointed manager. He's an assistant manager, obviously a former player. Again, super young, inexperienced. Should be interesting to see how Dortmund kind of pivot from this coaching change. Feels like it's such a last minute change where Terzic gets you to a Champions League final. Yes, sure, he underperformed in the Bundesliga, but I mean the whole world we're talking about Dortmund and this kind of Cinderella run they made to the final, given they were in the group of death. Do you think he's going to be given the time to make this a success, or do you think this is going to be one of those short runs for a young, inexperienced manager?
Yeah, this like sort of screams out to me as Dortmund wanting a Dortmund guy, and the fact that he's played over 220 times for the club. Not a ton of experience in coaching. In Turkey, I think where he was at, they finished 10th in the league. So it doesn't jump out to me like, hey, this is somebody that they've been looking for a while. And the surprise, I mean, before the Champions League run, there was always talk about Terzic going, right? And then he gets this run, and not only does he get the run, the results really came based on his tactics and how the team was set up. And of course the execution by the players has to be there, right? That's a no-brainer, but it's not easy. I mean, you're playing home and away against PSG. You have to really understand the tactical nuances, the commitment that the group had to play his style or play the way the manager wanted to set the team up. And you add all that in, and I was just really surprised to see him let go.
I mean, Mats Hummels made it pretty public, right? I don't agree with these tactics. They might have gotten us to this point, and they outplayed Real Madrid too for the first 45. They should have gone in with a comfortable lead at halftime. So it's one of those things where I think he was not very convinced by the club's backing. And if I'm a manager and I've taken the club to a Champions League final and I can walk away because they're not really showing a commitment or a proper backing if a player is speaking out on me. Plus, a Mats Hummels that's not getting any younger. He's probably got one, maybe two max at that level. I mean, that speaks volumes. So I guess I can see it in a way of walking away while your stock is as high as it's going to be. Tony, you feel the same way?
Yeah, and getting away from basically the one club you've been at, right? So to kind of start making your own path. But with regards to Şahin, it was interesting. Brian said, and I hadn't thought about it in these terms. He said, they wanted someone that kind of understood Dortmund, right? A guy who played there. Şahin, obviously, as we talked about, played there. And then I go back to his first managerial job. He ends at Antalyaspor as a player, and then immediately starts managing the club. So it seems like he's the type of guy, like if you have him in your club, you realize, because how many times do we hear guys say, well, I knew this guy was going to be a manager. We've spoken about our own teammates that we knew this guy was going to be a manager somewhere down the road. So it seems like he's the type of guy that when he's in there, you start realizing like, oh man, the guy's pretty smart. Like he gets this. And we don't often see guys just walk off the field and become managers right at the club. And look, Antalyaspor is not a small club in Turkey. It's like the club below, like Fenerbahce, Beşiktaş, Galatasaray. And then there's Antalyaspor now. Who went there? Was it Drogba that went there not a while back? I can't remember. They've brought some big names
to Galatasaray.
Okay, but they brought some big names in Antalyaspor. And Trabzonspor is the other one, which is across the Black Sea. Like those are the clubs that are spending money. So they trusted him there, and they trust him at Dortmund, and they probably have had an eye on him because this is a pretty quick move to make, right? So they've probably been kind of monitoring him and said, well, it's a guy that played here. Let's see how his coaching career goes. With regards to Gio, I mean, we don't really know. We don't have a big enough sample size of Şahin's work. But maybe a young manager is kind of what he needs, like someone who understands him a little bit more. I don't know. I'm trying to think of positives for Gio to get himself in. But I will say,
Yeah.
Brian, I've said this time and time again. I still think, for me, as good as Gio is at the club level, the onus is on Gio to get himself into his starting 11, wherever it is that he plays, right? That's the onus is on him. It's not the manager's onus to put you in, right? And I remember one thing I remember about Bora, and it stuck with me my entire life. Bora used to say to us, I don't put the lineup on the board. You put the lineup on the board. He goes, I just write the names down. Right. And then you think about it, you're like, well, yeah, he's kind of right. Like, we put the lineup on the board, not him.
But
you know
Tony,
what I mean?
we've been playing for managers who no matter what, whether it's a contract dispute, whether it's the sporting director trying to send a message, disagreements with agents, maybe it's a disagreement with how you maybe addressed him in practice or you disagreed with him in practice. There are so many things that can prevent you from being in a starting 11, no matter how well you train or how well you play. So the coaches can kind of use it any way they want.
You're making excuses now, right? You don't think this is on Gio to be one of the best 11 guys week in and week out in training and to get on the field?
I 100% would tell you if this happened just with this one club and this one manager, then I would say, yeah, okay, it's not Gio, it's everything else. You can make an excuse, but everywhere he goes, or no matter which coach it is, there's something there. So it is on Gio at the end of the day. It's on Gio to be healthy, to stay consistent in practice, to train as hard as you train, like you play. It's what I tell my kids now at 8 years old. When you play the same way in training that you would in a game. Focused, the intensity, the tempo. And so at one point, you got to look yourself in the mirror and go, why am I not playing? Why am I not in the squad? Why am I not getting all the playing time? So
that's my point.
It's a theme now. It's not just a one-time thing. So you're 100% in that case. Your guy is right with that comment.
Yeah, the one thing that we have seen. So he did coach Haji Wright, and Haji had 16 goals. Then he makes a move. They brought in Bukska from New England, who you're very familiar with there, Charlie, and he scored goals for him. So he likes a big center forward. So Fulkrug's going to fit in that setup. And maybe they're looking at that as, okay, he knows the Dortmund way. With the staff and the players that we have here, it becomes a good fit. And now it is all about whether or not Gio can sort of open his eyes, and Sahin can bring Gio back into this group and get the best out of Gio, because we all know Gio is super talented, but to your point, Charlie, he needs to be training every day. He needs to be on the field with his teammates and putting in the effort, because if all that happens, you can see Gio making the next step, but it's always a big if.
Well, there's just a lot of connections with Nuri Şahin, because yes, played for Klopp, Mourinho, credits Klopp as his biggest influence, had coached Haji Wright, was super close with Christian Pulisic at their time in Dortmund. So you could see that he probably has some understandings and some close connections to get maybe a better picture of Gio. So all we could do is hope that it works out. And if it doesn't, you have 2 tournaments this summer that could boost your stock and hopefully put you in a better place. And we know Copa America, this is where we got to see Gio take the next step in his evolution as a number 10 with this U.S. men's national team, and be higher up the pitch, be closer to the attacking players so he can be the creative spark that we need. And then if Dortmund is not the place and he hasn't found a club and he played inspired at Copa America, I would assume they would allow him to go to the Olympics